We ask a lot of questions about where we come from. We dig up bones. We map genomes. We try to piece together the story of our species. We've gotten pretty good at the what and the when. We know we're apes. We know we split from the ancestors of chimpanzees somewhere around 6 or 7 million years ago in Africa. We know a parade of hominin species came and went: Australopithecus, Homo habilis, or Homo erectus. We know we Homo sapiens showed up a few 100,000 years ago. We have a rough timeline. We have fossils. We have a framework. But that's not the real question, is it? The bones tell us about bodies, they tell us about walking upright, about growing brains, about changing diets, but they don't tell us about the thing that truly makes us different. They don't tell us about the ghost in the machine. The biggest unanswered question, the one that sits at the heart of it all, is this: how did we become conscious? And I don't just mean awake, I mean self-aware. I mean the thing you're doing right now. You are not just processing these words, you are experiencing them. There is an I in your head, a narrator, a self. You can think about the past, you can worry about the future, you can imagine things that have never existed. You can feel regret and hope and wonder. You can look at your own hand and think, this is my hand. I am here. An ape can't do that. Not in the same way. A dog can be happy or sad, but it doesn't lie awake at night contemplating the nature of its own existence. This internal, subjective, self-aware reality is the hallmark of being human. And we have almost no idea how it happened. This isn't a question that a single fossil can answer. Brains don't fossilize. Minds leave no direct evidence. So we're left looking for clues, for shadows cast on the cave wall. The story of human origins is really two stories. One is the story of a body, of an ape adapting to a new world. The other is the story of a mind, of a brain that somehow woke up. The first story, the physical one, we know pretty well. It started when the world changed. The forests of Africa began to shrink. The savanna, the great open grassland, expanded. And some apes were forced out of the trees. They had to survive on the ground. This is where the first great human adaptation seems to have happened. We stood up. The bipedalism, walking on two legs, was a huge gamble. It made us slower. It made us more wobbly. Childbirth became more dangerous because of the changes to the pelvis. So why do it? The old idea was that it freed our hands to see over the tall grass. Maybe. But a more likely reason is that it's just more energy efficient for covering long distances. On the savanna, food is spread out. You have to walk. A lot. Walking on two legs saves a ton of calories compared to knuckle walking like a chimp. But standing up had a side effect that changed everything. It freed our hands. For millions of years, our hands didn't have to be feet anymore. They could specialize. They could carry things, food, babies, tools, and they could make things. Our hands, with their opposable thumbs and fine motor control, became the executors of the ideas our brains would eventually have. For a long time, not much happened. The early hominins, the Australopithecines, like the famous fossil Lucy, walked upright. Their brains were still ape-sized. They were basically chimps on two legs. They probably used sticks and stones as tools, just like chimps do today. But they didn't make tools, not in a systematic way. Then, around 2.5 million years ago, someone did. We see the first stone tools, what we call the old Darwin industry. They're simple. They're crude. Just a rock, a core, with a few flakes knocked off to create a sharp edge. But don't be fooled by their simplicity. Making one requires a series of deliberate choices. You have to find the right kind of rock. You have to know how to hit it, at what angle, with what force. You have to be able to see a tool inside a plain stone. This is the first whisper from the emerging mind. It's evidence of planning. It's evidence of foresight. The creature that made this tool, likely Homo habilis or handyman, wasn't just reacting to the world. It was acting upon it. It was thinking ahead. It needed a sharp edge to butcher a carcass, and it knew how to create one. This is a cognitive leap. This new ability to make tools changed our diet. We could now slice meat off of bones and crush bones from marrow. We became scavengers and eventually hunters. Meat is a very dense source of calories and fat. And that extra energy went somewhere important in our brains. Brains are incredibly expensive. Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight, but it uses about 20% of your energy. You can't grow a big brain on a diet of leaves and fruit. You need high-quality food. So, a feedback loop began. Better tools led to better food. Better food fueled bigger brains. Bigger brains were able to make even better tools, and the brains did get bigger. The brain of Homo habilis was bigger than an Australopithecines. The brain of the next major player, Homo erectus, was bigger still. Homo erectus was a game changer. They were taller, more like us, they controlled fire, and they invented a new kind of tool, the Acheulean hand axe. This hand axe looks like a teardrop-shaped stone, but it's a work of genius. Unlike the simple Oldowan chopper, a hand axe is symmetrical. It's shaped on both sides. The maker had a mental template, an image of the finished product in their mind, and they worked the stone meticulously to achieve it. This takes planning, skill, and patience. Some of these hand axes are so beautifully made, so much more refined than necessary for just butchering an animal, that some archaeologists think they also had a social or even aesthetic function. Was this the beginning of art? Was this a way of showing off your skill to a potential mate? We don't know, but we know the mind that made it was becoming more complex. So the hardware was getting better. The brain was growing, but a bigger computer is useless without better software. When did the software of consciousness get installed? This is where the evidence gets thin and the questions get deep. We need to talk about something called theory of mind. This is the basic understanding that other beings have minds of their own. They have their own beliefs, their own desires, their own intentions. You have a theory of mind. You know that I, the writer of these words, have thoughts you can't see. You know that if you hide a toy from a child, the child won't know where it is because they didn't see you hide it. It sounds simple, but it's a profound cognitive ability. It's the foundation of all complex social life. It allows for cooperation, for teaching, for deception, for empathy. When did our ancestors develop this? It's almost impossible to say. Coordinated hunting, like driving a herd of mammoths off a cliff, would seem to require it. You have to anticipate what your fellow hunters are going to do. You have to understand their intentions. Caring for the sick or elderly in a group also suggests it. If you feed someone who is too old to hunt, you are showing empathy. You understand their state of mind, their hunger. We see fossils of individuals who lived for years with debilitating injuries. They could only have survived if someone else cared for them. This might be the earliest evidence of compassion, a direct result of seeing another individual as a feeling being, just like you. But the real revolution, the thing that seems to have launched us into a completely new reality, was symbolic thought. This is the ability to let one thing stand for another. The word water is not water. It's a collection of sounds that we have all agreed represents the clear liquid that we drink. A flag is not a country. It's a piece of colored cloth that represents the idea of a country. Money is not wealth. It's paper or metal that represents value. Our entire world is built on symbols. And the ultimate symbolic system is language. We have no idea when language started. Spoken words, of course, leave no trace. We can look at clues. We can look at the shape of the skull base, which might tell us about the position of the larynx. We can look at the hyoid bone, a small bone in the throat that supports the tongue. The Neanderthals had a modern-looking hyoid bone. Does that mean they could speak? Maybe. We can also look at the brain case. We can see imprints of the brain on the inside of the skull. In modern humans, the areas responsible for language, Broca's area and Wernicke's area, leave a distinct pattern. We see hints of these areas developing in earlier hominins. But even if they had the physical equipment for speech, did they have something to talk about? Their language isn't just about making sounds. It's about sharing ideas. And not just ideas about the here and now, like, look, a lion. A monkey can do that. Human language is special because we can talk about things that aren't there. We can talk about what happened yesterday. We can plan for what we will do next week. And crucially, we can talk about things that don't exist at all. We can talk about spirits, about gods, about tribal myths, about laws, about justice. This ability to create and share fictions is what allows Homo sapiens to cooperate in huge numbers. You can't get 100,000 chimpanzees to work together. They don't know each other. They would just fight. But you can get 100,000 humans to work together in a city or a nation because they all believe in the same shared stories. They believe in the idea of the nation, the authority of the government, the value of the money. These are all fictions, shared symbols. Language is the operating system for human society. When did this magical ability appear? For a long time. Scientists talked about a human revolution or a great leap forward around 50,000 years ago. This is when we see an explosion of art, of complex tools, of burials, of culture in Europe. It looked like a sudden cognitive Big Bang. The modern human mind just switched on. But recent discoveries have shown that the story is much older and much more gradual. In Africa, we've found evidence of symbolic behavior that is far older. At Blombo's cave in South Africa, archaeologists found pieces of ochre, a red pigment engraved with cross-hatch patterns. Yes, they are 75,000 years old. They serve no practical purpose. They are abstract designs. They are symbols. In the same cave, they found tiny seashells, all with holes drilled in the same place. They were beads, part of a necklace or bracelet. This is personal adornment. This is about identity. It's about saying, I belong to this group, or simply, I am me. This is a mind that is self-aware. We found even older evidence, ostrich eggshell beads from 60,000 years ago. A collection of eagle talons from a Neanderthal site in Croatia, 130,000 years old, that were likely worn as jewelry. The use of pigments goes back even further, maybe 300,000 years. These discoveries are chipping away at the idea of a sudden revolution. It seems the modern mind didn't just appear overnight. It was flickering into existence for hundreds of thousands of years. It emerged slowly, piece by piece. First, the simple tools, then the more complex tools that required a mental template. Then the first hints of compassion, of caring for others. Then the first simple symbols, the scratch marks, the use of color. And then personal adornment, and then finally the full flowering of art and imagination. The cave paintings of Lascaux and Chauvet, dating back 30,000 years or more, are a window directly into the minds of our ancestors. These aren't just pictures of animals, they are breathtakingly beautiful. They show a mastery of perspective and form. They capture the spirit of the horse, the power of the bison. What were they for? Were they hunting magic to ensure a good hunt? Were they records of past events? Were they part of shamanistic rituals, painted in the deep, dark, silent parts of the cave by people in altered states of consciousness? We will never know for sure, but we know that the people who painted them were us. They had the same brains, the same minds. They were looking at the world and not just seeing it as a collection of threats and opportunities. They were seeing it as a place of wonder, of beauty, of meaning. They were trying to make sense of it. They were trying to find their place in it. This brings us to the most poignant evidence of all how we treat our dead. Most animals simply abandon their dead, but at some point, our ancestors started to bury them. The early evidence is ambiguous. At a site in Spain called Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, archaeologists found the remains of nearly 30 individuals of a species called Homo heidelbergensis from 400,000 years ago. They seem to have been deliberately dropped into a cave shaft. Was this a burial? A ritual? Or was it just a convenient way to dispose of bodies? We don't know. But later, with Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens, the evidence becomes undeniable. We find bodies carefully laid in graves. Sometimes they are placed in a fetal position. Sometimes they are buried with objects, tools, animal bones, shell beads. At a site called Kafse in Israel, a person was buried 100,000 years ago clutching the antlers of a red deer. Why? What did it mean? Burying the dead is a profoundly strange thing to do. It's a lot of work for no practical benefit. It suggests something new is happening in the mind. It suggests an awareness of mortality, an understanding that life is finite, and perhaps a hope or a belief that death is not the end. The grave goods might be offerings, or things the person would need in the next life. This is the birth of religion, of metaphysics. It's the mind trying to grapple with the biggest questions of all: what happens when we die? What does it all mean? So, back to the central question. How did this happen? How did a primate brain designed for finding fruit and avoiding leopards start asking questions about the afterlife? There are no easy answers. Some scientists think it was an accident. The brain grew big for practical reasons, to make tools, to navigate a complex social world. And consciousness, self-awareness, and symbolic thought were just an unplanned side effect, a spandrel of having all that extra processing power. The brain became so complex that it just sort of woke up. Others think language was the key. Once we had a way to label the world in our own internal states, we could start to think in a new way. The language gave us the words for menu, for past, and future. It provided the software that allowed our brains to model the world and ourselves in a completely new way. The inner monologue you have in your head is, in essence, you talking to yourself. Perhaps consciousness is a conversation that started in the brain once language evolved. And some believe it was driven by our intense social nature. Humans are hypersocial. Our survival depends on our ability to cooperate and understand each other. This created an evolutionary pressure for bigger brains that could handle the complexities of social life, keeping track of who's who, who's allied with whom, who owes what to whom. A mind that could model the minds of others. Theory of mind would have a huge survival advantage. Perhaps self-awareness simply grew out of awareness of others. To understand another mind, you first have to have a concept of a mind, starting with your own. The truth is probably a mix of all of these things, Bipedalism freed the hands made tools. Tools provided better food grew bigger brains. Bigger brains navigated a more complex social world. This social world drove the evolution of language. And language unlocked a new way of thinking, symbolic, abstract, and self-aware. It was a long, slow feedback loop playing out over millions of years, but this still feels like an incomplete explanation. It explains the how in a mechanical sense, but it doesn't explain the why. Why does it feel like something to be conscious? Why do we have this rich, internal, subjective experience? This is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. We can explain how the brain processes light and creates an image of the color red. But we can't explain why you experience the redness of red. And that is why this is the biggest unanswered question. We can trace the evolution of the brain case. We can date the first stone tools. We can analyze the chemistry of bones to see what our ancestors ate. We can even sequence their genomes. But we can't excavate a mind. We can't pinpoint the moment the first of our ancestors looked at his reflection in a pool of water and had the thought, that's me. We are trying to reconstruct the most important event in our history with no direct evidence. All we have are the artifacts the mind left behind: a shaped stone, a string of beads, a painting on a cave wall. These things are like fossils of thought. They are beautiful and frustratingly incomplete. They give us glimpses, but they don't give us the whole story. The search for our origins is, in the end, a search for ourselves. We want to know how we became human, because we want to know what it means to be human. Are we just clever apes with an overgrown brain? Or is our consciousness something special, a fundamental new property in the universe? The fact that we can even ask this question is perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. We are the one part of the universe, as far as we know, that has woken up and is trying to understand itself. The answer to how that happened is still out there, buried in the past, waiting to be discovered. And the search for it is the greatest detective story of all time.